Workplaces are organized differently. I'm a professor, actually, not only in Denmark. Do you know where? In Iran. Don't I look Iranian? No. But I am actually a professor in Iran also. And for me, that is extremely exciting, interesting, because it's a different culture. How different they are organized. They're organized in the way that people listen to the boss and do what the boss tells them. Okay? And do nothing except for that. Yes, they work, but they work differently. Okay? In my country, people will say, okay, the boss tells me what to do, but I also know how to do. As long as I do my work well, my boss is happy. As long as I'm productive. Okay? But that means that people who are entrepreneurially minded can go into workplaces and be happy, unfold their entrepreneurial minds there. So it's different. I'm just bringing this little example to say we've done things at the individual level. We have ignored all context. You were told this morning, right? You are studying 2 places. Excellent to study what you actually said in 2 different contexts. Here, okay, was a very nice you have, I think. Okay, and that's what we can do here also. We can take one step further than just looking at individuals. Because there's nothing, or at least we don't know if there's anything peculiar about the Caribbean here. Right? We don't know anything about that from what we just did. So what we need to do is, so to speak, bring culture back in. Or you may say, institutions. Are you familiar with sort of organizational studies? There's neo-institutionalism or new organizational analysis. Paul DiMaggio, Walter Powell, John Myers. They are thinking about institutions in society and how they're different around the world. Some of them also think about how institutions are becoming more and more similar around the world as a consequence of some kind of globalization processes. Okay? But the idea is we ought, especially if we think that there's something peculiar about the Caribbean or about some Caribbean countries, is Jamaica different from Barbados? And so on. We want to know that. We don't know anything about that from what we did until now. Okay? This was, you can say, a kind of universalistic thinking. Okay? So, our task now is to bring in institutions. And how can we think about that? Well, the way I like to think about that is to say, consider this individual behavior, but then think that the way gender matters for example, risk willingness is something that is different from culture to culture, or from country to country. Okay? And that's what we should start to look at. Okay? Let's maybe look at that. Does it really differ? Does it really differ from country to country? Well, we can do that. Let's just see if there's anything to be studied here. Okay? Let's just see if there's anything at all to be studied here. So we would say we are interested in knowing. Whoops. We are interested in knowing how gender is related to, was it risk willingness? Okay, We saw men are more risk-willing than women, but the question is, does this differ from country to country? Or is that kind of the same all over? The way we can do it, most simple for the Caribbean, is to include country and do the analysis for each country. Okay, so we have 8 countries. We'll now do a small cross-tabulation, one for each country, and take a look. Just take a little look for a beginning to see, are there any differences among the countries? So here we need to put in the percentages also. Okay. So let's take a little bit of a look at it. The first country is Barbados. 86% of the men do not fear failure. 81% of the women do not fear failure. So we do see that gender difference. Colombia, 74 versus 69. So it's kind of a 5% difference. So roughly the difference is the same in Barbados and Colombia. In Costa Rica, oh, this is interesting. This is interesting. Wasn't it the lady here that said there's women are similarly risk-willing? Costa Rica, yeah, you're not from Costa Rica, but
pretty close to that.
Yeah. What's wrong with Costa Rica? No men? Right? What we see is in Costa Rica, men and women are indeed apparently the same in their risk willingness. Okay? So that shows, as a small indication, culture matters. Some kind of institutions or culture matter for how gender affects risk willingness. Costa Rica, gender does not affect risk willingness, it seems. Okay? It seems. First look. Okay? But in some other countries, the first ones we saw, Barbados and Colombia, gender matters in a similar manner. Okay, and this is actually enough. This is enough. All we are saying is, it looks like culture matters. So it is worthwhile including culture. And what is it, how is it that it works? It works, apparently, we can say, if we go back, in the way that the gender effect is about 0 in Costa Rica. Costa Rica? Yeah, your neighbor, almost. Okay, the gender effect is just about 0 there. In some other countries, Colombia and Barbados, the gender effect is to increase men's risk willingness. Okay? That is to say, the effect of gender is moderated by country, by culture. Okay? That's what we are saying here. There's a moderating effect or impact, culture or institution, something about the country. Something about the country. I don't know yet what. That I don't know. I only know countries are different. Okay? Country matters. So something in the country, culture, institutions, I don't know what yet, matters for that gender effect. So we would say country or something about the country moderates the gender effect. Okay? The gender effect depends on country. Depends on some characteristic of the country, I don't know what. Okay? We would like to investigate that. It's not enough for us to say countries are different. What we have to get at is, what is it about a country? What culture? What aspect of culture? Maybe it's something about gender roles. Maybe it's something more about resources. Maybe it's something about the pressure, the necessity of men, and so and so. Maybe it's about the availability of other options that are less risky. What do you think my father was?
Not sure.
No, of course you're not sure, but what do you guess? You think he was an entrepreneur? A teacher, exactly. Yeah, okay. But that's about social inheritance. I'm actually from a very rigid society, you could say, where there's social inheritance, pretty much in England also, I think, still. And that's an aspect of the culture. We follow in the footsteps of our parents, especially father. Okay? So, we want to examine such a thing. And let me show you then how we can actually examine that moderating effect of culture. Just give you an example of that. But first I need to explain a little bit more to you about GEM. In the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, we do this survey of individual people. That's what we worked with until now, nothing else. But we do a second thing also. In each country, we ask some experts, some people who are especially knowledgeable. They may be, it includes some people who are professors, it includes some people in the government, it includes some people who are journalists, it includes leading business people, business advisors, for example. So we have these experts who know a lot about entrepreneurship in the country. And then we ask them about how are the framework conditions, or you could say, how are the institutions in the country that expectedly affect entrepreneurship. Let me give you an example of that, several examples. We ask them, what is the availability of financing in the country? Okay? That's a way of measuring the framework condition of financial availability. And they rate it on a scale. We have several experts doing that. We take the average. So we have one number for availability of financing in the country. Another one is, are the institutions of higher education, the universities, the business schools, are they providing good training in starting and operating a business in the country? So it's a characteristic of the country, a characteristic of the national system of education. How good is it on a criterion of promoting entrepreneurial education? Third example would be, does the country, or how much does the country have in terms of support for high growth business, high growth firms? Do they have special programs for high growth firms? And yes, for example, Denmark, you know Anders Hoffmann, who's in my country. He's a government official, a leading government person, and he's very keen on promoting national support for high growth firm. Okay? And they do that in several different ways, provide support for those firms that are ambitious. What?
The growth funds.
Exactly. And more than that, they're also financial, the growth foundation and such. So there are special support mechanisms in the country. So when experts in my country are asked about, are there provisions in the country for high growth firms, then people would say yes, yes, yes. Okay? But when asked about how good is the educational system, in especially higher education in my country, for providing entrepreneurship education, they say no, 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 no. That's pretty bad. Yeah. Okay, so we have these expert ratings for each country, and that is indeed the context. I'm pointing to you because you were talking about the national policy in on each island. Okay, and this is a similar thing about the social context, the national context, institutional context. We also have questions asking directly about culture. You all know Hofstede, right? Individualism and that. Individualism versus collectivism. We also have a question like that because it's relevant for entrepreneurship. Is the culture in the country promoting individual initiative, giving each person own responsibility for own fate? Okay? If you're good, it's because you are good. If you succeed, it's because you are good. Don't blame anyone else. That's about individual responsibility, which matters for entrepreneurship, we would think. Okay, so there are these measurements of institutions, of culture in the country, and we include them in GEM. And I actually included these measures from that national expert survey, we call it, in the data file here. So we can actually now begin to measure, to investigate. Does the national context, the national culture, the national institutions, do they moderate such an effect, for example, of gender upon risk willingness? Okay? We can do that. We have the measures. Let me show you how to do that. And this is, then we're talking about data at two levels. We're talking about data at the individual level, the adults, and we're talking about data at a macro level, the country. Okay? We have data at these two levels, two hierarchical levels, in the sense that the individuals are nested within a country. So then we get into what, Egbert? Hierarchical modeling. Hierarchical data, we get into a version. It's a light regression. It's light regression. Okay? And let me illustrate that. Let me just illustrate it briefly. It is called mixed models, and I'll do a linear one. And we are saying we're dealing with people who are within a country. So we have to tell SPSS that this is within a country, and then we say it was risk willingness that we were interested in. No fear fail, that is then our dependent variable, and then we still have the people within countries, and then we have the, for example, gender as our independent variable, and we are really interested in that gender effect. So this here is a main effect of gender. I have to get it up here. I need to get this here up.
To the corner of that window.
What? I think I can make it smaller here. Now yeah, like this here. Okay, then I can get to it. Need to continue here. Then we're thinking about our countries. We have sample. So we have random, more or less random sample of countries. And situations like in a regression. Now, I think I've specified what I need to specify. Just think of it pretty much like a regression. Pretty much like a regression. And I think I have it here now. Yeah. It is like a regression where the dependent variable is risk willingness and the independent variable is gender. So there is also a coefficient or intercept, a constant. And what we see is gender has a positive effect that is significant. That is like before. Okay. Now, what we want to know is something about country differences. And I have 8 countries. And what we are then thinking is the phenomenon we are studying, risk willingness, may differ from country to country. In some countries, risk willingness may be high. In some countries, risk willingness may be low. Do you know that from other studies? Who has studied such things? Not among us. Is there a famous person who has studied that kind? Risk willingness. Not calling it risk willingness, but calling it something else. What?
Art of the deal.
I can't hear.
Art of the deal.
Art of the deal. I'm thinking about uncertainty avoidance. Ah, okay, Hofstede did something along this line. Along this line, okay, there are differences. I come from a culture where people don't want uncertainty. That's why we're going to work instead also, okay? There are differences among countries, and if we want to know that for the Caribbean, let's just take a quick look at that. We want to say we have a sample. Oh, no, not a sample. We have 8 countries in the Caribbean, and we want to know how this differs among the countries in the Caribbean. I think we get it by this here. Yeah. Now we see how apart from gender being in a certain country affects risk willingness. For that, there's one country, the last one on the list, Venezuela, is taken as the reference, and then we can see where risk willingness is high. Risk willingness is high in Trinidad and Tobago. There you go, lady. Okay, we're in Jamaica. Risk willingness is a little bit below here, but much lower in El Salvador. Okay, so risk willingness differs from country to country apart from the gender effect. Okay, that is not what I really wanted to get at. This is only the beginning. What we really want you to know is the gender effect different from country to country? Okay, that's what we want you to know. And for that, what we form is, do anybody know? If we want to examine whether an effect is different from one kind to another kind, what is it we form then? We form the interaction. You heard that in statistics. We're talking about interaction effect. The interaction effect here, in this case, between gender and country. Okay, that's how we know whether the gender effect is the same all over or different from for some countries. Okay, so we need to form that interaction. Analyze, mixed model it's called, linear, continue, fixed here. We form the interaction of gender and country. So it's the interaction is a product. Okay, so that's what is it is the product of gender and country. That is to say, it is the combination of being male or female and country, to see whether the gender effect is different among the countries. Okay, so that's what we want to take a look at. We say continue, and we click OK. And we see that here. Okay. We want to see whether the gender effect is different from country to country. And what this here shows us is Venezuela is taken as the reference for comparison. So we are saying, is the gender effect in some countries different from what it is in Venezuela? Okay. In Trinidad and Tobago, it looks negative, but it is not statistically significant. Okay. Colombia may be a bit different. Let's see if there's another one. No, Colombia is the closest one. Colombia has a p-value that's not quite significant, but it is the one that comes closest. So, this here would suggest that in Colombia, the gender effect is different from what it is in Venezuela. And how is it different? The coefficient for Colombia, together with gender, is positive, meaning that in Colombia, being man increases the risk willingness more than it does in Venezuela. Okay? So that gender difference is greater in Colombia than it is in Venezuela. So countries differ. Countries differ. That's what we know now. Maybe. It's not quite significant, but almost. Okay. It looks as if countries differ. Now that's not the end of it. There's one more thing that we want to do. We want to know, what is it about a country? It's not enough to say Colombia is different from Venezuela. Who cares? We don't care about Venezuela, we don't care about Colombia, unless we happen to be from there or so, right? But what we really care about is, what is it in the culture that creates such different gender effects, okay? That's different from saying that countries differ. This is the next step, okay? So, for that we use the framework conditions. And let's take an example of that. We're not interested in how countries differ, but in the actual effects of some characteristics of the countries. Mixed model, linear, continue. And I actually gave you a little code book. It's in it's one of the files that I gave you. I want to pull it up. That little code book I wrote for you, explaining the variables just a tiny bit. Because this here tells us something about the national framework conditions, the institutional conditions, or cultural conditions that we should think about. When we say, or when we think about, does the gender effect on risk willingness depend on something in the culture or institution? Can you pick one? Try to pick one of these here that you think may have to do with gender, or risk willingness. Education. Okay, education, that is to say, but I want to push you a little bit on that. Namely, does this here affect males and females differently? Okay, it's not about whether it affects education overall, but does it affect males and females differently? We need an argument for that. You have one? What? So, yeah, support for women, right? There is actually a measurement in here. There is actually a measurement in here about, is there some kind of support for women? And then we would say, if there is support for women, then what? Then that would make the women more risk-willing. Okay? That's what we may think. Okay? Sounds...
The reverse. The reverse. The only time you need support for women is because...
You're just...
Sorry.
Shit!
I'm sorry.
David!
I'm sorry.
David! No, just sit down and hold your horses. We actually have exactly that kind of study. Exactly that kind of study. But let us just go with you first. Okay, then we'll return to this guy. Okay. Let's see, where are we now? Now I got distracted. What we are saying now is that instead of thinking about country, we're thinking about this institutional condition that says support for women. Okay, so that is kind of much better to think that way. Then what we are saying is, which one was that? It was P. It was P here. Okay? P is the condition that we're thinking about here. We first included as a main effect, and then we are, but what we're really interested in is that moderating effect that we model as an interaction. I think I have it here, and the rest, yeah, the rest is okay. I think that's it. And now what we're looking at, for is the effect, how that support for women may moderate the gender inequality. That is, that we saw overall for the Caribbean, whether it moderates that gender inequality in the way that it brings women up, right? Or you might say, brings men down compared to the women. And we should think about the men in comparison to the women, because men are coded 1, women 0. So we're thinking about the men in comparison to women. So what you are actually hypothesizing is then a negative effect, bringing the men, the gender inequality down, reducing the gender inequality by that institutional condition. Okay, so that is a negative interaction effect that you are hypothesizing. Did I click OK? Yeah, here. Okay. We have the interaction effect. That's all we're interested in. The interaction effect. The coefficient is negative, as you suggested. Okay? But is it significant? No, it is not significant. So we don't find support for your hypothesis.
Finance.
We don't find support for the opposite hypothesis either.
Finance.
Financing.
Yes.
In what way would that work?
Well, you know, a woman who's comfortable in her home and has a nice steady income coming in, probably be more apt to risk than somebody who has nothing coming in. A woman likes security. She likes to have her household, her bills paid, her lights on. So she would be less likely to take a risk, either through education or otherwise, than if she had nothing. If she had nothing coming in, she's not apt to risk.
Yeah.
But if she had a nice income coming in,
Yeah.
she might be willing to if her security is not threatened.
Yeah. I'm fully with you on your argument, but what we're thinking about is something national. You're thinking about the individual family income. That's the way I hear your argument.
Well, I think people have lost the family. The family is not as strong.
Asking you for us is to think about that national condition. What? Yeah, we should think about access to financing. Okay, so the question that we should think about is, following up on what you say, but think about it at the national level. If there is great financing available, will that make women more or less risk-willing? We're not talking about entrepreneurs, we're talking about adults. Okay?
I don't think it would have that because I don't think it would have the effect because both men and women would have the same. The finance would be available to both of them.
I follow your argument. You can also make an argument for that. If there's great financing available, then women have a greater chance of getting it. Because you can say priority is given to the men, if you think that. Okay, then women will get financing only if there's a lot of financing available. I don't know, but I'm trying to think.
But you could also spin it another way where women tend to be more economical in their business transactions.
Yeah, okay, but let's try it. Okay, but it's great. We have to, when we think about this here, we really have to sit down and theorize. Okay, and you started to theorize, and then you had this gentleman jumping up and saying, no, it's the other way around, right? But he was also engaging in theorizing. He was saying that there will be that institutional support in countries where there's a need for it, right? That was the argument.
I'm thinking more of education, where a man might be more willing to take a risk, no matter what his finances are, because I've found that men are the dreamers, where a woman has their feet firmly planted in reality.
Yes, that's an argument. Okay, now you're making an argument. Men, now we're really getting into a gender discussion. Men are, what you're saying is, men are oblivious to social conditions. Women are very sensitive to this. Okay, but let's give it a try. Let's give it a try. You're actually talking along the lines that you were talking about the importance of education. And I would say, yes, it may be that by education, women may become more willing to take risks through entrepreneurship education, because you can say maybe the education will counterbalance gender roles in society. Okay, so you can actually continue your line of thinking in that direction. So let's give it a try. So what you're saying is, instead of thinking about these support for women, think about education. Education is D, I think.
Fine.
What?
Fine.
Oh, we'll do this here first. You came first. Okay. So what we're saying now is there may be an interaction effect of gender and education. Oh, we need also to have the separate effect. The main effect of education here. Okay. And your thinking was that through education, women will become more risk-willing. They will gain, it's actually in line with what you said, because you say men are oblivious. Nothing affects men. Yeah, dreamers, okay. But you're actually in agreement with her when she says these things affect women more than men.
Oh, well, education is extremely important to making any decision.
Yeah. So when you're saying it will increase women's, again, it means it will decrease men's. Okay? So you are actually hypothesizing a negative moderating effect of education here. Okay? Negative meaning it reduces the inequality. It reduces how much men are above women. Okay. So let us see whether that might be so. Aha! Wow! What I'm saying wow to is that the interaction effect is statistically significant. There is an interaction effect, but is it positive or negative? It is positive. Okay? So it works the other way than what you thought. Okay? It's life. You can write a different article than the one you thought you would write. Okay? Now, let me wrap this up. What? Yeah, sure. Let me wrap this up, what I have been talking about. The intention has been to show that we have some publicly available data. It's on the web. I've given you some. If you didn't get it, I'll send it to you by email if you give me your address, email address. And you can use these data for analysis, and you can write it up as articles. You can publish it in good journals. I published recently in Research Policy, in Small Business Economics, in International Journal of Gender and Entrepreneurship. Something about gender, of course. So yes, the good journals, they do publish this material. And what I've been trying to show is, with some examples, how we can study individual behavior in the context. In the context of country and institutions, like we've been discussing here, education as an institution. Could have taken financing. Okay, we took support for women as an institution in society where we think this might moderate the individual behavior. And I think this is indeed one of the strengths of that data set, because we have it for many countries, not only 8 in the Caribbean, but more than 100 around the world. So it is an opportunity to study entrepreneurial behavior, adult people's behavior in a social context that we actually can measure with data that comes from different places. I took some data coming from GEM, but it's not the same interviews. So it's not self-reported. At the institutions, not at all. Yeah, not at all. So I'm with the criticism that is about that common source bias that can occur with self-relying entirely on self-reported or data from the same source. Data from the same source may suffer from such weakness. Okay, but this study here of institutional effects does not suffer from that. We could have taken other things like GNI, gross national income per capita. We could take Human Development Index. We could take a measurement of trust We could have taken Hofstade's. We could have taken from the World Values Survey. We could have taken from anywhere where we have such quantitative measures of some institutional conditions. And we can put that into the data file and do the kind of analysis that I just did here at the end of how institutions moderate individual behavior. Okay? That is what I wanted to say about the possibilities. We also have to recognize the limitations. For the individual behavior, we may have such a common source bias, because it's all from the respondent, from the individual person, and then we have those people that say yes to everything, those people who say no to everything. And that may be so pervasive that it actually destroys the result. So pervasive. Another weakness, I would say, readily acknowledge, is the data are not longitudinal. Okay? We have a snapshot of people. So it's not longitudinal. It would be extremely interesting to follow people over time. But in the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, that is not done. The strength of it is the cross-national character of the data. Okay? There are many. Another one you might say is we have very crude measurements. We have yes-no questions, a lot of yes-no questions. We have, for innovation, we have 3 measurements, but that's still not a lot. You may think about what she had this morning, the one about social entrepreneurship. She had several measurements for each concept. That was very good, and she emphasized that. But I would say that's, in my opinion, my assessment, are some of the weaknesses. You can also say having data from different countries is difficult because people in different countries understand questions differently. The survey is administered somewhat differently from country to country. I work also in China, and China is not the most reliable country for data collection. Okay. Now, David wants to add some comments to this kind of analysis. So, David, the floor is yours.
It's 20:53, okay? I will do.
That's Danish time.
I will do 4 minutes. In essence, the reservations about GEM. Number 1, it is not, repeat, not a panel, which means that what we have is we start with a population and we disaggregate that population into those who say, say that they intend to start a business in the next period of time, and those who say they don't. Repeat, say they don't. We do not know whether those guys are telling lies or not. What we know is that of the people who say they're going to start, some will start and some will not. So you've got the first group broken into 2. You've got those who say they start and actually start, and those who say they start and don't start. But actual starts, which is what you're interested in, not what people say, also will include the second group, i.e. those people who said, no, I have no intention of starting a business, but 1 week later, 1 month later, maybe even 18 months later, they actually start a business. How many people have you heard have gone past a shop which is empty and said, oh, well, maybe it's time I started a business, and we start the business the next morning? So you've got the group with which I talk about actual starts. We've got the people who said, yes, I intend to, and those people who said, and no, I don't intend to, but actually start. So this is starting to get messy because actual starts aren't necessarily bearing any resemblance to stated potential starts. And then entrepreneurship, arguably, is not just about starts. It's actually what happens to them once that business gets going. We know, and Thomas knows only too well, 40% of people who start a business today will not exist in 2 years' time. Is that entrepreneurial? Is that entrepreneurial intentions? Absolutely not. If it is, almost nobody starts with the intention of ceasing within 2 years. So what are we actually capturing? What we're capturing is stated self-report intentions which may or may not be reflected in actual starts, which in turn almost certainly are not reflected in the performance of the businesses. And without a panel, without the panel of tracking these guys over long periods of time, there is a serious risk of not capturing fundamentally what it is that you are interested in. That is just one, but an important one, of the health warnings which have to be issued at the beginning, middle, and end of every paper that draws upon GEM. And I say this with Thomas in the room, knowing that my major claim to fame is I once wrote articles with Paul Reynolds, who actually was the initiator of GEM. And my reservations about never being involved with GEM is that I don't think fundamentally it captures the essence of entrepreneurship. But you guys may differ. Thomas.
Okay, I just have...
It was 5 minutes. It was 5 minutes. 58.
Okay, Michelle.
Hello, everyone. I just wanted to thank the presenter so much for presenting on our GEM data. Meaning we have GEM Barbados here, we have representatives from GEM Trinidad and also GEM Jamaica. And I just wanted to point out too that GEM Jamaica is based at the University of Technology. And so we were so worried last year in the sense that we were wondering, would we get funding to actually continue? Because this is something that we often, worry about each year. And I was so happy when I came in, I saw representatives from our sponsors, NCD, that were here. And we want to applaud them because without them, we wouldn't have any funding to continue this wonderful project for 2016. And how much we really appreciate them. So I just want to say thank you so much. And if you guys are using the data, we really encourage you to use it. If you're using the GEM data, if you can please contact us and let us know when you publish your papers, because GEM Global always wants to know that there are people working with and using the data, and so they are happy to know that people are using and working with the data because it solidifies our need, the need for us doing this work, because sometimes there are questions being raised, is GEM a worthwhile project in Jamaica and within the Caribbean, and we know that it is. And so if you're working with the data, please let us know, because each year I put together a report and send to GEM Global on the work that is being done using the data. And so we want to continue the use of the data. So thank you so much.
Okay. Are we done?
Yes.
Are you tired?
It's 3 o'clock.
3 o'clock? Only 3 o'clock? Okay. Thanks for the week.
Right, and I'm sure all of you would like to applaud Professor on an excellent presentation, and I'm sure also that you would like to thank UTech. UTech? Yeah. It's at UTech for bringing this presentation to the GEM, the idea of the GEM, to all of us.
the beauty about it is that this information, you can use it beyond here. Somebody was asking that. And so if you have further questions, please feel free to speak with either of them outside of here. I thank you again for taking the time out to come and to be a part of this session. And of course, if you do have the time, the next session begins right after. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Professor, thank you, and good evening.
So presentation. I just pressed the wrong button. Okay, good. Thank you. You did that though, not me. I suppose, let me just check. Okay, good. Now, how is that for balance? Can I use this? Hello, thank you. All right. No, I've been briefed, properly briefed. You can read that any way you want. There you go. Now, how is that for balance? As I said before, I had a choice when I was making this slide of a man walking a tightrope by himself. But I thought that a true representation of balance was a strong woman supporting a man in need. Ladies, you get the picture? You agree with me? Can you imagine the strength that that woman must have? Yes? And you ladies do it every day. Now, one of the things I learned at Bellevue was you must know your audience before you get there. And since I knew the audience would be predominantly women, I figured that my slides should be gender sensitive. One of the words you should not have missed in Mr. Goling's presentation was the word leverage or leverage, because it's a very important word when it comes to balance. And all week you people have been advertising that you are the reference point, not true? For accounting professionals. I hope that sank in, because a reference point, as the ICAJ claims to be, ought to form a focus or a locus or even a fulcrum around which the professionals, you, can balance your lives and balance yourselves. And what the ICAJ, the Institute, is doing and ought to continue doing is to provide the attitude and opportunity for its members to maintain balanced lives. Sound good? Well, that's where we're going today. One of the things that was missing from school is that the teachers never ever came to you and told you what they were trying to teach. You came to class, you knew there was a syllabus somewhere, and unless you took the time to go buy one from the exam office, nobody shared it with you. So I've learned that when I'm going to speak, even though for a short time, I should tell you where we're going. Well, after each slide, there will be a prescription. You see what I mean? That's how my patients always laugh nervously. And it is a prescription that we hope you will follow. That's not supposed to happen yet. Take time. See, I take time with my slides, you know. I consult in putting them together. What a wonderful thing technology is. You notice a group of Jamaicans who want justice? Can you make them out? The picture? Is it clear? Wonderful. Well, that's us doing the justice thing. And in this month of October, where Librons, the greatest people on earth, exist. The scales are a very wonderful symbol of justice. And where there is justice, there is balance.